There is a ship on the ocean right now that can sail to any coastline on Earth and plug an entire city into clean power within hours of arriving. It sounds like something from a movie, but it is real. It is already built, and China made it, and that is not even close to the most impressive thing they have put on the water. China is building and deploying ships so advanced that the rest of the world is still scrambling to understand how they got there so fast. We are talking about machines that can reach the deepest point on Earth, build a record-breaking bridge in the open ocean, and move enough cargo in a single trip to stock an entire country's shelves. Some of these ships do not even have a real comparison on land. They are changing the rules of global trade, deep ocean exploration, and how we make power. Today, we are counting down 10 of the most amazing Chinese ships operating right now, and the ones at the top of this list will change how you think about what humans can build. If content like this is your thing, please hit that like button because it takes a lot of effort to make these videos, and subscribe so you do not miss the next one. Stick around because number 1 is something most people still do not believe is real. But to understand how China reached this level of building on the ocean, we have to start with the ship that proved they could stand on their own in the coldest places on Earth. Number 10, Xue Long 2. This is the vessel that told the world China was serious about ruling the ocean. It is called the Xue Long 2, which means Snow Dragon 2 in English. China designed and built it from scratch using only their own technology. That had never happened before. What it can do in frozen water is almost crazy to think about. Most icebreakers only go forward. They push ahead, crack the ice, and keep going. That is it. But the Snow Dragon 2 can break ice going forward and backward. It can spin around and carve through frozen channels that would stop any normal ship dead in its tracks. It crushes through 1.5 meters of solid ice like you would step on a thin piece of frost on your window. Inside, it has 8 science labs and space for more than 90 people. Scientists can do research in some of the wildest, most faraway places on the planet without having to stop. It can stay out for months without needing to head back for fuel. That gives China a steady presence in the polar regions that was just not possible before. Here's why that matters and why it is part of how these ships are changing everything. The polar regions hold some of the most important resources on Earth. Being there on your own terms with your own technology changes who gets access to those resources. Before this ship, China had a hard time reaching those frozen areas again and again. Now they can go whenever they want. The Snow Dragon 2 sent a clear message. China does not need to copy anyone else's plans anymore. The ship carries smart radar and sonar that scan the ice ahead, so the crew can steer through dangerous waters without trouble. The hull has a special shape that uses the weight of the ship itself to bend and break the ice below. Normal ships would get crushed in these conditions. This one just keeps going. But going from frozen surface water to the deep ocean takes a totally different kind of machine. Number 9. CNOOC 981. Next up is China's first homemade ultra-deep water drilling platform. Think of a 20-story building that is fully up and running, just floating out in the middle of the open sea. That is basically what this is. When you add the depth of the water and the depth of the seabed together, it can drill down more than 8 miles. That is deeper than Mount Everest is tall, and it is all happening under the waves. It was made to handle waves taller than 100 feet, and it gives over 200 workers a comfortable place to live while it works. What people often miss is how hard it is to keep something this big perfectly still. The ocean pushes and pulls in every direction, but this platform has to stay steady enough to drill with pinpoint accuracy. It uses a heavy mooring system with giant chains and anchors that grab the seafloor tight. Thrusters run all the time to fight the wind and waves, holding the huge structure in place so the drill pipe does not break. Before this platform came along, China had to rely on companies from other countries to reach deep ocean energy. Firms from the United States and Europe controlled that technology. If they did not want to share, China simply could not get to the resources sitting off its own coast. This is another case of these ships changing everything. Once the CNOOC 981 was built, China had its own seat at the table and built that seat with its own hands. The platform opened the door to huge amounts of oil and natural gas hidden deep under the ocean floor, helping power millions of homes. Workers live on the platform for weeks at a time, counting on advanced safety systems that can deal with emergencies far from land. But drilling is just one piece of the ocean economy. Sometimes you just need to move mountains of stuff from one side of the planet to the other. Number 8. Hongchi Gang. At number 8, we have a ship made for pure massive hauling. The Hongchi Gang is a bulk carrier that stretches almost 1,200 feet long and can carry 400,000 dead weight tons. A single trip on this ship carries enough raw material to build 50,000 cars, or supply the steel for 15 skyscrapers. The reason ships like this matter comes down to money and efficiency. Instead of sending 4 or 5 smaller ships that burn 4 or 5 times the fuel, one of these giants makes the trip once and gets it done. The hull is shaped to slice through waves with very little resistance. The ballast system keeps the ship steady even when it is loaded with mountains of iron ore heading from Brazilian mines to Chinese factories. The ship is basically a giant floating warehouse. When it is fully loaded, it sits 75 feet below the waterline. That is so deep that only a few specially built ports in the world can even accept it. It is like buying in bulk at the store, except the numbers are so big they are hard to even picture. The engine room is amazing on its own. It holds a diesel engine that stands several stories tall and makes enough power to push this floating city through the water at a steady clip. The crew uses automated systems to watch the cargo and make sure the weight is spread out just right so the ship does not lean or bend. Every trip saves millions of dollars in fuel and shipping costs, which makes global trade faster and cheaper for everyone. And that is really the point of how these ships are changing everything. When you can move this much material this cheaply, the whole chain of making and selling goods around the world shifts. But moving raw materials is one thing. Drilling for them in the middle of a storm is a whole different challenge. Number 7. Haiyangshu 982. Number 7 turns the conversation from sheer size to exact precision. The Haiyangshu 982 is a semi-submersible drilling platform made for deep water work in some of the nastiest ocean conditions you can think of. What makes it special is not just that it can drill in 3,000 meters of water. It can do that while storms are tearing things up above the surface, all thanks to advanced stabilization systems that keep everything flat and working. The secret is the semi-submersible design. Instead of floating on top of the water like a normal ship, most of its hull sits below the surface. Down there, the power of the waves is much weaker, so the platform stays far steadier than anything riding on top. It is basically ducking under the storm while still getting the job done. The platform rides on giant pontoons sunk deep underwater, connected to the working deck by huge steel columns. That means even when 50-foot waves are crashing above, the drilling floor stays almost perfectly still. China went from having zero deepwater drilling ability to running several versions of these platforms in less than 20 years. That kind of speed does not happen by luck, and other countries have definitely noticed. This is part of the bigger story of how these ships are changing everything. When a country can drill in water this deep during storm season, it changes who controls offshore energy. The platform hooks straight into subsea oil wells, pulling up resources through a tangled network of pipes and valves that run on their own on the sea floor. The crew watches everything from a high-tech control room, adjusting drills and managing pressure with amazing accuracy. They can keep working straight through typhoon season instead of packing up and leaving, which saves huge amounts of time and money. The safety systems are built to handle extreme pressure from every angle. But what if the resources you want are not oil, but rare metals sitting in the dark at the very bottom of the sea? Number 6. Dayang Hao. At number 6, we get into something that sounds like it came from a movie. The Dayang Hao is a deep-sea research ship that can send robotic vehicles down to 36,000 feet. That is the depth of the Mariana Trench, the deepest spot on our entire planet. These robots do not need to come back up for tune-ups. They run on AI systems that work under pressure so intense it would flatten any normal equipment in an instant. The ship works like a mother boat, lowering high-tech submersibles into the pitch-black depths to map the seafloor and grab samples. Why does this matter so much? The ocean floor is covered in rare earth minerals, cobalt, nickel, and manganese nodules. Those are the exact materials you need to build electric car batteries and smartphones. As the world moves toward clean energy, the demand for these materials keeps climbing. Whoever can get to the ocean floor first and do it reliably has a massive head start. China is not just studying how to do this. They are actively getting better at doing it on a large scale, turning what used to just be an idea into a real working system. That puts them years ahead of other countries that are still sitting in meeting rooms, writing up plans. This is another way these ships are changing everything. The country that figures out deep sea mining first will shape the future of clean energy technology. The ship itself is a floating lab packed with sensors that can spot mineral deposits from miles away. The robotic arms on the submersibles can gently pick up nodules from the seafloor, sort them, and stash them for the trip back up. It is a huge operation happening in total darkness, relying only on cameras and sonar. The ship can stay at sea for weeks, sending its robots down over and over to build a full map of the ocean floor. This is not just looking around. It is getting ready for a future where the ocean floor becomes a major source of the stuff that powers our world. But bringing finished goods to your doorstep takes a totally different kind of giant. Number 5. COSCO Shipping Universe. At number 5, we have the ship that probably carried the containers that stock the shelves in your house. The COSCO Shipping Universe is 400 meters long and carries more than 21,000 containers in a single trip. That is like a freight train 47 miles long, moving across the ocean as one single vessel. Every container is loaded using computer programs that figure out the perfect weight balance. It is almost like a game of Tetris played by a supercomputer, except every piece weighs several tons, and the whole thing has to stay perfectly balanced on the open ocean. If the math is off by even a little, the stress on a ship this big becomes a real problem. The software looks at the weight of every single container and decides exactly where it should go to keep the ship upright and steady. COSCO's network reaches 160 countries across more than 320 international shipping routes. That means the chances that something in your home passed through a ship like this are actually very high. The scale of what this one ship represents in global trade is hard to even wrap your head around, and there are several ships in this class doing the exact same thing every single day. When you think about how these ships are changing everything, this is maybe the clearest example. A single vessel can supply an entire region with goods, and China runs dozens of these routes at once. The engine connects to a massive propeller that pushes an unbelievable amount of water to drive the ship forward. Even with all that power, the ship is built to use as little fuel as possible. It has special paint on the hull to cut down on friction and releases tiny air bubbles under the vessel to help it glide. The bridge, where the crew steers, is full of screens showing radar, weather, and engine info. A small team of highly trained sailors runs this floating city, letting automation handle the heavy work. When it pulls into port, huge cranes swing into action, lifting containers off in a non-stop, perfectly timed routine that can go on for days. Here is where things start getting truly wild. Number 4. Type 003 Fujian. The Fujian is China's most advanced aircraft carrier, and it launched in 2022. It displaces between 80,000 and 85,000 tons and stretches over 1,000 feet long. That puts it right up there with America's biggest military ships. Think of it as a floating airbase that can project air power thousands of miles away from China's coast. But the size is not the real story here. What makes the Fujian so special is that it uses an electromagnetic aircraft launch system. That is the same cutting-edge catapult technology that even most of the top navies in the world do not have. This system lets heavier planes take off carrying more weapons and fuel, which makes the carrier far more capable. The flight deck can handle 50 to 60 aircraft. During operations, the electromagnetic system can launch a plane every 30 seconds. Older steam catapult systems just cannot match that kind of speed. The system fires bursts of electromagnetic energy to push the plane to takeoff speed in just a few seconds. It does not need the bulky steam pipes that older carriers rely on. The construction also uses advanced materials and automation that cut down on crew size. Fewer people are needed to run something this massive. China went from having 0 carriers in 2012 to running 3 today, with more said to be under construction. The Fujian shows just how fast that program moved and how much further it plans to go. The ship is basically a mobile military base. It has living quarters, medical rooms, and hangars stuffed with jets. The deck is coated in special stuff that can take the extreme heat of jet engines blasting off. Below the deck, a maze of elevators lifts aircraft and ammo up to the flight line with machine-like precision. It is a bold statement of engineering power that took decades of work to pull off. And if that got your attention, the next 3 ships are in a completely different league. Number 3. Zhen Hua 30. The Zhen Hua 30 looks like something pulled from a dream. Run by ZPMC, this ship is 679 feet long and can lift 12,000 tons with its crane system. That is about the weight of 80 fully loaded Boeing 747 jumbo jets, all lifted at the exact same time. But the real achievement is not the power, it is the precision. The Zhen Hua 30 was the main vessel used to build the Hong Kong to Zhuhai to Macau bridge, the longest sea-crossing bridge ever built on Earth. It had to place 33 giant concrete and steel sections, each weighing thousands of tons, with pinpoint accuracy in open water. It did all this while fighting ocean currents, shifting tides, and typhoon season. Using a dynamic positioning system with several thrusters working at once, the ship held its exact spot for hours during critical lifts. It fought off wind and current that would push a normal vessel hundreds of yards off course. The thrusters are run by computers that constantly check GPS data, nudging the ship by just inches to keep everything lined up. ZPMC, the company behind the ship, now makes over 70% of the world's port cranes. The Zhen Hua 30 is the most striking example of an industrial power that has quietly become the backbone of global port systems. The crane itself is a web of massive steel beams run by a team of engineers who watch every cable and pulley. When it lowers a bridge section into the water, it does it with the care of someone setting a glass on a table. The ship does not drop anchors to stay put. It uses only its engines to fight the ocean, which takes huge power and perfect teamwork. If the ship drifted even a few feet during a lift, the whole bridge section could be ruined, costing millions of dollars and months of labor. But if you think building bridges is impressive, wait until you see what China did with the shipping industry itself. Number 2. COSCO Shipping Galaxy. The COSCO Shipping Galaxy was built in 2021 and is the most advanced container ship on the water today. It is 1,312 feet long and carries 23,020 containers in a single voyage. One trip on this ship could stock 4,000 Walmart stores or fill 80,000 shopping carts. Even though it is the largest of its kind, it is actually more fuel efficient per container than smaller ships. That is because the hull was designed using computer models that cut drag down to the absolute lowest point possible. The entire operation runs on a crew of just 22 people. Automation systems handle cargo distribution, navigation help, engine monitoring, and structural checks every single second of every trip. The brain of the ship is a central computer that processes thousands of data points per second. It adjusts the engine speed and rudder angle to save fuel without anyone touching a thing. The hull is painted with a special coating that stops barnacles from sticking to it, which keeps the ship fast and clean. China did not just build a bigger ship here. They changed the cost structure of global trade, and every country hooked into their routes feels it every time a shipment shows up. The bridge is so high off the water that the crew has to take an elevator just to reach it. From up there, the containers below look like tiny bricks, but each one is packed with goods headed for cities far inland. When the ship docks, it can unload thousands of containers in just a few hours, feeding the supply chains that keep our modern world turning. Even in heavy storms, the Galaxy stays remarkably steady, slicing through waves that would swallow smaller ships whole. The engineering that goes into keeping a vessel this size running smoothly is a sign of just how far shipbuilding has come. And that brings us to number 1. Honestly, nothing could have prepared the world for this. Number 1, China's floating nuclear power plant. Everything else on this list moves things. Cargo, minerals, aircraft, steel. What China built for number 1 does not move goods, it moves power itself. China's floating nuclear power plant program is based on Linglong 1 small modular reactor technology. It is the boldest maritime engineering project ever tried. The idea is simple, but the execution is mind-blowing. Build a nuclear reactor small enough, safe enough, and stable enough to operate on a floating ship, then sail it anywhere on Earth that needs power and plug it in. One vessel, 125 megawatts. That is enough electricity for 150,000 homes, and it can go anywhere on the ocean. Keeping a nuclear reactor stable on a ship sounds almost impossible, and without the right engineering, it really is. Chinese designers built backup cooling systems and stabilization technology smart enough to keep the reactor safe even in rough seas. No other country had done this at this scale on a moving platform. Think about who actually needs something like this. Remote Pacific islands that burn diesel fuel shipped in by boat just to keep the lights on. Offshore drilling platforms in the middle of the ocean running on expensive, dirty generators. Coastal areas in the developing world where building a normal power grid would take decades and cost billions. You sail this vessel in, hook it up to the local grid, and the problem is solved. When the reactor needs a tune-up, you sail it out and bring another one in. The Linglong 1 was the first small modular reactor in the world to pass the International Atomic Energy Agency's safety review. That process is so tough that most designs never make it through. Russia has a floating nuclear station called the Akademik Lomonosov, but it stays locked in one spot. What China is building goes further. It is a vessel that can be moved and sent wherever it is needed most. That is not a small step forward. It is a completely new way of thinking about energy. The whole system is designed to shut down instantly if anything goes wrong, using cooling that does not need electricity to keep the core safe. It is a floating power plant that goes to where the power is needed instead of forcing people to build cities around power plants. When you line up everything on this list, from a ship that breaks polar ice in both directions, to a crane that built the world's longest sea bridge, to a floating nuclear power plant, they all point in one direction. China is not building ships to keep up. They are building for a world that has not arrived yet. If you made it this far and found any of this as amazing as I did, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you do not miss the next video. There are related videos on the screen right now if you want to keep watching. Now I want to hear from you. If you could only sail on one of these ships, which one would it be? Drop it in the comments below.